Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar. And we'll be looking at how to measure the effectiveness of Pandora advertising. And of course, we'll be covering why that's music to brands' ears. And today's webinar is being sponsored by Nielsen. I'm Stuart File, head of Adweek's Branded Content Studio, and I will be serving as host of today's webinar. Before we begin, I'm just going to take a few minutes, let everyone know what to expect from today's presentation, and also to make sure that everyone is familiar with the features of our webinar platform. Our presentation today should go somewhere in the 30-minute range, maybe 35 minutes. Afterwards, we're going to have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if at any point during today's presentation you have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool on the left side of your screen, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can following the presentation. We are supporting social sharing on today's webinar, and you'll see the hashtag there on the bottom left of our title slide, hashtag #MeasurePandora. So if you are out there on social right now, you're out on Twitter, use that hashtag, give us a shout out, let the world know you're joining us today. We always love when people post stuff. If you've got a whole bunch of people sitting around in a conference room, we always love a couple photos of that, or whatever people are doing. We, share your GIFs, share your memes, share your photos on Twitter as you're part of the conversation today. But more importantly, be part of the social conversation. We'll be tweeting out some of the findings from today's webinar, and it's a great way to share it that way. It'll come from the Adweek Webinars Twitter feed, which is at AW Webinars. So if you're not following us there, you probably should as well. It is not too late to invite your colleagues to join us today, and we would really love it if they would. So about 15 minutes ago, everyone in the audience would have received a final reminder email about today's webinar, and in there you'll find a link over to the registration page for today's webinar. So share that link with your colleagues. If they can't make it live, they can always catch the on-demand recording of today's webinar, but there's still time for them to make it in live. But if they can't, that recording, of course, and everyone who's here will get a link over to that on-demand recording later today. Check your email about 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern Time. You'll get a link from us, and again, also feel free to share that with your colleagues if you think they're going to get some benefit from today's webinar. A few other little things we just want to cover. If you want a copy of today's slide deck, you can find that right now in the Event Resources tab that you see at the top of your screen. So you can get a PDF of the slides in there. If you are engaging with this webinar on demand, we're just going to give you a quick notice. Also in Event Resources, there's an MP3 audio file of today's webinar. So if you want to listen to this as you might a podcast, you can just go in there and download that MP3. Lastly, we always urge you to check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars. That's plural with an S at the end. So you'll be able to see our upcoming webinars. We've just actually posted 3 more this morning, so there's probably a list of about 6 or 7 upcoming webinars you can see and register for, but also you'll get access to our archive of on-demand webinars there, and they're probably about somewhere between 80 and 100 available right now that we've had over the past year, and you can see them all there, including several that have come from our sponsor Nielsen. So go on in there, check those out. We always, another great way to, when you have a moment, increase your knowledge on what's going on in the marketplace today. So let's take a minute and move on over to today's webinar. Let me just let you know who's joining us. We've got a great lineup of speakers. So first off, our guest today is Carrie DeGroot, who's Head of Research and Analytics over at Pandora. And of course, she's got expertise in marketing effectiveness, media mix modeling, and attribution, some of the things we'll be covering today. And Carrie's really successfully led leadership teams, both large research departments, smaller concentrated groups. Before Pandora, she was over at several other media companies, iHeart, Turner, and FX. We've also got 2 executives here from Nielsen from their marketing effectiveness area. So first off, we've got Tietz Fetkov, who's the SVP of Marketing Effectiveness over at Nielsen, responsible for driving value with Nielsen's largest marketing effectiveness clients in the CPG and retail industries. And of course, we've also got Jeff Schatz. Jeff is VP of Marketing Effectiveness over at Nielsen as well. And in his 8+ years at Nielsen, Jeff's really held roles that both help advertisers and publishers evaluate marketing performance and optimize strategy with data-driven insights. Jeff, T, and Kerry, welcome. And T, let me pass this on over to you to begin today's webinar.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you everyone for coming to listen to this very important topic. I will start by talking a little bit about the world out there and our consumers. We all know our consumers are bombarded with many messages every day. They see thousands and thousands of ads every week, both online and in an offline environment. They also are subject to a number of promotions and pricing discounts at the store, which of course makes the world they live in and the world we live in quite complicated. So an important question in this environment is, how do we actually tell what drove the sale? It is really important for us to understand what percentage of our sales should be attributed to the various drivers, whether it's promotional activity, pricing activity, more of the traditional print and TV media, as well as some of the new digital media, specifically streaming radio versus terrestrial radio, email, CRM, etc. So in this complex world, the gold standard for measuring all these media activities and their impact on sales is marketing mix modeling. Marketing mix modeling is designed to really tease the impact across all these different activities. The way we do this, starting on the left side here, is really line up all this information, bringing in data across information around pricing, promotions, online media, offline media, as well as the product distribution. So when we talk about consumer packaged goods, it's really important that the product is on the shelf and it's available to the consumer. Otherwise, the impact of the ad will be non-existent. So I'm taking a stock of these various factors allows us to build what we call a data cube that combines all this information, and it allows us to line it up with sales and be able to really understand, where do I see a sales change, a sales bump, or a sales decline as we line up these sales with the various activities. It is really a statistical model, a regression-based approach. There is a number of techniques out there people are using. There is Bayesian approaches that allow for ways to stabilize the model to really increase its predictive power. It is really important that in this entire modeling environment, we're coming up with results and lifts from the various media drivers that not just allow us to explain what happened to our sales or why our sales were up or down and the past performance of our business as a result of our media investment, but also it's important to be able to predict. So if you tell me what you're going to do from a media perspective next quarter or next year, I should be able to tell you what the impact is on our overall sales and what the sales lift will be that media will generate. So when you look at the very right of the slide that's being shared right now, the objective of marketing mix is to break out these sales and attribute a percentage of sales to the various drivers. What that allows us to do next is to estimate the total dollar impact of this advertising in terms of sales as well as in terms of profit. So if we have the margin for a particular product, we can take the total sales driven by TV, by radio, by print, and come back with the dollars or the profit that those activities have generated. Once we have the total impact on sales, we can then come up with measures of return on investment or return on advertising spend. So taking the various costs of the different media investments and really just dividing total impact over total cost to get to a measure of return on advertising spend or return on investment. So, and this is more of a primer for everyone on the phone who is less familiar with marketing mix modeling. Again, it's been around for a few years. It is really our ability to read various drivers of sales, including both traditional and digital media. One thing that I want to point out that's really important is we should not be overlooking these other in-store aspects like pricing and promotion. So being able to go to that level of granularity by using either store-level data or very, very granular geographic information allows us to capture what happens in store. And even if we don't come back with the ROI on the promotions within marketing mix, we're able to come back with a well-estimated ROI for media because we have a very strong way and very precise way of controlling what else happens in store. The reason we do that is so we don't wrongfully attribute sales to media when it should be going to promotions and vice versa. So it's important that all of these drivers are within the same system, the same model. So marketing mix modeling really started in consumer packaged goods. It's a technique that's used now across a number of industries. At Nielsen, we work with many industries. They're all on this page. CPG is a really important one, but this technique is used across automotive, financial services, pharma, retail, QSR, restaurants, telco, travel and hospitality, et cetera. So really, a number of industries have adopted this technique as a way to measure the impact on sales. You can use this technique to measure the impact on various other KPIs in addition to sales. For example, in retail, you might be interested in understanding traffic to your store. In telco, you might be interested in understanding new signups for business. So it's less about kind of the total sale. It's more about the KPI for that particular business. We've been doing this for a number of years, over 25 years. We do this in a number of markets across 30 plus industries. And really, our group deals with and estimates the impact of over $50 billion of advertising dollars out there, which makes this a very, very important part of Nielsen's business and a really measurable part of what we do. So being able to drive tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of incremental impact by better reallocation of your marketing dollars across all of these factors. So to get into the specific and start talking about the background of the current study with Pandora, I'm going to pass it on to Carrie DeGroot.
Thanks, T. So I wanted to give the background on how this all got started. We were consistently hearing from our CPG clients that Nielsen was their vendor of choice for media mix modeling. However, we don't get much visibility into the performance. So what we did is we asked Nielsen to join us for our CPG Sales Summit to present the high-level methodology and to give us an idea of what our clients get when they request these kinds of reports. It was at that time that we came up with the idea to ask Nielsen to reverse engineer this and do a media mix study for Pandora. Nielsen's only request was that we were category specific. What that meant to them was not just CPG, not just beverage, but as specific as carbonated soft drinks. And to go further on our partnership, I'll hand this over to Jeff from Nielsen.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, so we can move into really how we approached this project and the goals of measuring effectiveness of Pandora's advertising. And as Carrie mentioned, a lot of this was done through a partnership that we actually developed with Pandora, who joined and now participates within Nielsen's Marketing Effectiveness Publisher Program. So to talk a little bit about this publisher program and our relationship with Pandora, one thing that this does is it gives us access to the impression level data directly from Pandora. So we can get very granular information that we provide within our models. It helps to make sure that we are accurately representing Pandora within the studies that we do. And it also benefits us in terms of training opportunities. So Carrie mentioned that we did go and we chatted with Pandora at their sales summit. We've also had Pandora come and talk to our entire analytic consulting team just about the ad products that are available with Pandora, understand how they're sold, how they function in the marketplace, and having kind of this back and forth allows us to really make sure we're set up for success when we're talking to advertisers and really understand the opportunities available within Pandora and how to talk through the effectiveness and the ROIs that we're seeing within the data. So all of this is really done, at the benefit of our mutual clients, and it also opens up doors for studies like this one, which we'll go through today, which really digs in a little further for Pandora specifically, since they're sharing this data with us, how they perform in a specific category when we compare them to other media tactics. So getting into the scope that we defined here, what we looked at was a 2-year deep dive into the carbonated soft drink category. Within this model, we included 3 carbonated soft drinks manufacturers, and we actually had a variety of products within there from each of those manufacturers included. This captured over 60 Pandora campaigns over the 2-year period, so we had a ton of Pandora data to work with here. And then even beyond Pandora, we were looking at, over $1.3 billion in media spend across all the other tactics. So really drilling in deeply and understanding what's driving performance at a category level and how Pandora compares. And on the right side of this slide here, you can see kind of the big questions that were driving this project. Starting at the top, we wanted to understand how Pandora should be included and just modeled in an MMM analysis. And then beyond that, provide a little visibility and transparency into how Pandora is performing compared to these other media tactics. And not just compared to other media tactics, but also then deep dive into Pandora. And what can advertisers gain out of something like this? They have their own marketing mix studies, but what can we learn if we're diving into Pandora on how they can optimize the media that they're purchasing and make the right decisions when they are deciding to buy media with Pandora. So moving on to the next slide, I did touch on a little of this already, but really a huge benefit here is that we had very, very granular information from Pandora. What I'm talking about is getting DMA level insights behind their national and regional campaigns. So this is a benefit to us because it allowed us to understand exactly where the media was being executed and differences in exposure levels by those different markets. When we have those different exposure levels by market, those line up nicely to our store level sales outcome data. So the models that we build are going to be just more accurate and more precise. And we really combine this with the context that we learned behind how their inventory is sold and purchased, and that was through all the training activities that we have with Pandora and a lot of discussions on their different ad products to really give them better accuracy and also greater insight into the performance of their platform. So with that background, I'm going to pass it back to Carrie, and she's going to talk through some of the initial findings that we found here.
Thanks, Jeff. Within the study, we measured a variety of marketing tactics, and one interesting finding uncovered was how strong Pandora's overall return on ad spend is within the carbonated soft drink category. We compared Pandora to both digital and traditional media channels and found Pandora's strong return on ad spend above both of these at $1.90. So what we're really showing here is that for every dollar invested into Pandora, you get $1.90 revenue in return. To give more context, I can break the return on ad spend down further by tactic. So the digital media channel contained online video with a $1.20 ROAS and display with a 0.63 ROAS. The traditional media channel contained print with a $1.69 ROAS, out of home with a $1.61 ROAS, TV with a 0.45 ROAS, and radio with a 0.37 ROAS. Keep in mind, Pandora received less than 1% of the overall share for the total category ad spend, but generated the highest ROAS of all media. That's 2 times the digital media average and almost 4 times the traditional media average. We wanted to dig into the ROAS a bit deeper to understand whether strong ROAS was driven by Pandora's effectiveness, defined as incremental volume driven per impression, or was it the CPM? What we saw is that Pandora's strong return is a function of both. As you can see in this bar chart, Nielsen indexed the sales lift as well as the cost. So on the left, to online video, and then on the right to digital display. And what this is saying is that an index of 100 would indicate that Pandora is on par with that given tactic, which is close to what we see with the online video sales lift. What that means is that Pandora drives similar volume to the online video channel, but from a cost perspective, it's much less expensive, as noted in that second bar. In fact, Pandora's cost is more similar to what we're seeing here on the display advertising, the bar chart here on the right. While Pandora's inventory is priced similar to display, it actually is able to drive as much volume as the richer online video format. Jeff, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, so it was really interesting to see that. We did see really strong ROAS. We saw strong incremental volume being driven. But it's also important for us to really understand how volume response changes as investment levels change. And that's really what we're highlighting here on this graph. What we wanted you guys to see is that when the sales lift that you receive from a tactic or a channel, that's not going to stay the same depending on your level of investment. So really the GRPs or the impressions that you're putting into a tactic, the return that you get from that is going to vary depending on how many weekly impressions you are running. So here in this example, if you look all the way to the left, right, you see that there's really a certain level of investment that's even required to break through, and we have that highlighted at the breakthrough point. If you look at the y-axis, the lift really isn't much of anything until you hit a certain inflection point, and then all of a sudden you're starting to break through, and you're going to see some volume return. As you put more and more into that tactic, that volume response is going to grow and grow, so you're getting more benefit out of it. But you are going to reach a certain level where that's going to begin to plateau. So if you think about investing into the same channel or tactic, you can put more and more money in there, but eventually frequency levels are going to be out the roof, and you're just not going to get the same return for the next dollar you spend in that tactic. And we see that kind of level off here in this visual. What that also does is it's going to impact your net profits, which you can see below. So what we really like to do is understand these response curves and look at each tactic so we can advise clients on where they should be advertising, how much to be advertising. You really want to hit that sweet spot that we have identified, and that'll make sure that you're investing properly in the tactic and you're getting the most out of it and you're maximizing your return, but you're not over investing in a tactic where the next dollar you spend there is actually going to decrease your overall ROAS. So with some of this context, this is what we looked into with Pandora within the study. We looked at Pandora's response curves, and on this slide, what we're doing is we're looking at how this category, carbonated soft drinks, compares to what we would see out of the response curves. In the kind of purple area, you can see the current execution levels of the various brands that we had included. So this is in millions of impressions weekly. So we see that it's really in the 800,000 to 5.7 million range for the average brand in terms of what they were spending or executing, I should say, on Pandora. When we looked at those response curves and where advertisers can be, we actually saw their optimal range was much higher than this, right? So the effectiveness of the next impression wasn't even going to start declining until you're at that 8.3 level. So we really saw this huge opportunity for advertisers within the space to continue to invest more weekly into Pandora in order to hit that optimal range, which will allow the effectiveness to even grow beyond what we were seeing in terms of the ROAS and the incremental volume within this study. We also took this a step further, and we teased apart those impressions to look at how frequency and reach both play a role. So you can see that at the bottom, we teased out what actually is the optimal range from a frequency perspective here. And this was also very interesting. What we were seeing within this category is monthly frequency really varies greatly. We had everything from a 2 to a 6 covered here, and when we were really looking at what that optimal range, that optimal level would be at, we saw that it would be at about a 3 to 4 within this platform. What this tells us is if you kind of combine the top and bottom, there's this huge opportunity for brands to continue to invest and shift more into Pandora, but at the same time, there's the need to really look at that frequency, leverage frequency capping, and make sure that you're really executing at the right level so that incremental money you're spending with Pandora is reaching new and unique audiences and extending that reach. So I am going to turn this back over to Carrie.
Thanks, Jeff. So given the insights we gained from the response curve and seeing the benefit in increasing investment on Pandora, we wanted to see what would happen if a brand was able to add an additional $500,000 to their marketing budget and allocate it to the Pandora platform. And what we saw is that increasing investment by $500,000 would bring the average carbonated soft drink brand within this study into the optimal support range. And it would boost the overall return on ad spend from $1.90 to $2.11 for Pandora. With this strong return, an additional $500,000 investment in Pandora would lead to an incremental $1.3 million in revenue for the brand. We also wanted to do some scenario planning to see how this would play out by taking moderate amounts out of tactics like spot radio, network radio, and TV. So in a different model, we asked Nielsen to do a share shift to show buyers what it would specifically do for their business. So assuming the cost per points remained constant, $2 million was shifted from spot radio, $500,000 was shifted from network radio, and $2 million was shifted from TV. If that full $4.5 million was shifted to Pandora, the carbonated soft drink category could have seen an additional $9.4 million in revenue from those tweaks. So based on the Nielsen MMM study, we would like you to consider the following, starting on the top left. Use audio to engage with new audiences. Pandora is the largest digital audio streaming in the U.S. for brands to reach the most valuable customers. Every month, we reach over 100 million unique listeners, and brands can use audio to precisely target audiences through Pandora's robust proprietary data, which we have over 2,000 first and third-party segments. The next, the cap, frequency, and maximize reach. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, we received less than 1% of total category advertising spend. That was 2x the digital media average and almost 4 times that traditional media average. So for this category, the Nielsen MMM analysis showed that brands can see significant improvement in sales impact by maximizing reach and managing campaign frequency levels with Pandora. Third, optimize media spend with specifics, with shifts across channels. We also talked about a few different optimization models within the marketing mix, allocation that would greatly improve overall effectiveness and sales impact for the carbonated soft drink category. And these minimal tweaks in media mix allocation away from less efficient tactics to Pandora can really grow revenue impact overall and improve ROAS. And then finally, leverage granular data to measure the ROI. No doubt that being able to understand where Pandora fits within the overall marketing mix results can improve how brands leverage us as part of their connection plan. So leveraging the granular level data and partnering with Nielsen to execute these types of studies will help Pandora and all our advertising partners build long-term strategies that can effectively drive better business results. Thank you. And let's go back to Stuart to see if we have any questions.
Great. Well, thanks, Carrie, and thank you, T, and thank you, Jeff, for sharing the results of this study with our audience. We've got a lot of questions that are queued up already, but I do want to just again alert our audience, remind our audience, if you do have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool on the left side of your screen. We're going to get to as many audience questions as we can over the next 10-15 minutes or so. If we don't get to your question, I always do make sure that we forward all the questions over to our sponsor, so there is the opportunity for somebody to respond to you offline. Just want to also provide a couple of quick reminders here to our audience. First off, if you do want a copy of today's slide deck, you will find that in the Event Resources tab at the top of your screen. So go ahead on in there. You can download a PDF of the slides today if you want to take a look at these later on or share them with your colleagues. Also, today's webinar is being recorded. We had a few people asking about that already. So yes, it is being recorded and will be available on demand, obviously, a little after we're over here. If you return to the registration page, it'll link you right over there. But do check your email about 3:30, 4 o'clock today. We're going to send you a link to the on-demand version, so you can use that if you want to come back and engage with this or share some of it with your colleagues who you think are going to benefit from some of this information. So let's move on over to some of the questions that we've gotten. They're coming in fast and furious, so thanks to you, audience. But Carrie, let's just start here. So when you were actually looking at the study itself, what did you really sort of find was the biggest surprise or the biggest learning that surprised you out of all of this research?
Sure. Thanks, Stuart. I think for Pandora, it was how we compared to our competition. Seeing that we were 3x more effective than display and then on parity with video, but so much more cost effective is really what surprised us the most at Pandora.
Okay. And Jeff, let's direct one over to you here. So, we're looking at this, and again, you were following, putting together Pandora campaigns. So, have you sort of, as a result of this research, come up with any sort of key best practices that you would pass along to advertisers or things that they really need to keep in mind as they're developing Pandora campaigns?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, a lot of the learnings and insights here kind of ladder back to some of the research we've done in, marketing effectiveness on just ad effectiveness best practices in general. So reach is one that, did come up here a lot. We know that reach can be a driver of ad effectiveness and performance, and we were seeing within Pandora, that there is that opportunity to really extend your reach and thinking about how you're reaching new audiences potentially with Pandora and maybe why that's such a driver, unique audiences there. And then, other things like we know creative quality is important, and Pandora is in an interesting space, I think, being streaming audio. They can really create things that stand out, grab attention in different ways, and I think creative and reach are two of the main drivers that we do see in terms of how to build effective advertising. And targeting as well. I think Carrie did mention this on the last slide, but leveraging Pandora's unique assets that they have in terms of data and how they target buyers and audiences, that also probably comes into play in terms of developing best practices around executing this media.
Jeff, to just sort of stick with you just for a second here, because we've gotten this question coming in from a few people, and maybe Carrie, you might know this as well, but I'll start with Jeff. So, a lot of the questions they were asking is what kind of advertising was being measured in this study, or what, is it, when thinking of Pandora, is it the audio ads, is it the display or accompanying display, and, is there sort of a breakdown to that, because people just want to, sort of get that general sense?
Yeah. So I can start, and
Yeah.
when we met with Pandora, we looked at everything essentially. So we looked at different levels, and we did have that granularity available. So we looked at their display stuff, we looked at their audio, and this is kind of showing the aggregated totals of what we found across their platform.
Got it. Yeah, Carrie, anything to add on that and that sort of balance of audio and display?
No, it was a nice balance of audio and display that we decided to present out because they looked very similar, the results in aggregate.
Okay, got it. Thanks. T, let me toss one your way here. So, when we're looking at the sort of media mix and it's very common to sort of look at it and look at the results from a digital point of view, but we do have a few people who are asking here about using this sort of media mix modeling for someone like Pandora, and then understanding how it tracks back to retail traffic. Is there any sort of sense that you have in looking at sort of these on how that works?
Yeah, so I mean, without getting into any specifics, what we've done here with respect to understanding Pandora's and other types of traditional and digital media advertising to sales, this can be absolutely replicated in the world where kind of the dependent variable in the model or the outcome measure is not sales, it's traffic. Now, of course, the metric there may not be necessarily ROAS or ROI, but it will be some type of incremental traffic or per thousand impressions or per dollar spend on Pandora and all these other drivers. So again, in the retail space, traffic in restaurants specifically, traffic is often more important than sales themselves. Just being able to get that extra set of people through the door. There's with restaurants, there's things like capacity constraints that have to be looked at. So traffic is extremely important. This can absolutely be replicated. We don't know what we would find, but it is something that can be done quite easily.
Got it. So, Carrie, anything that you want to add on that and understanding sort of that link more specifically to Pandora and understanding any of the retail traffic?
No, I think for now I'm good.
Okay, good. Thanks. So this was. I just want to actually, before we get there, I just want to remind our audience again, if you do have a question for our speakers today, just simply use that question tool on the left side of your screen. We're going to go another 5 minutes or so. I do want to let you know, again, if we don't get to your question, I will make sure it gets forwarded over to our speakers today. So Carrie, someone here is asking about using sort of Pandora data and getting their hands on Pandora data to incorporate in their sort of specific model. So how would someone go about doing that?
Sure. So this one's super easy. All you need to do is just reach out to your Pandora sales lead, and in return, they'll reach out to the sales research department here at Pandora. We have a seamless way to just send over exposure files for all of our campaigns that Pandora was on the buy for to Nielsen. It's as simple as that.
Okay. That was that's an easy answer. And Jeff, let me direct this one to you, this one that came in. And so, when you're seeing sort of Pandora's performance, how does this really sort of compare to, other sales response solutions that you've seen, things like attribution modeling or matched market testing? So looking at the different options, where do you sort of see this and how does it compare?
Yeah, I think each of those kind of response solutions play a different role in the space. So, it really depends when you're starting this. We define the objectives with Pandora to understand where to measure, but they really complement each other, right? So if you're measuring Pandora in a mix, mix is really good for all of this strategic planning and like budget allocation and high-level strategy decisions and shifting dollars, also getting comparability across like all different tactics. So T talked about not just marketing, but having everything in there and really understanding the drivers of your business performance. But then also, it would be valuable to include Pandora within something like an MTA or multi-touch attribution, just because that really gets more to the tactical level. So there you can really see by device or by placement any changes that can be made and optimizations that can be made like in real time, essentially. And then we also do a lot of that other things like sales lift testing or match market, and that's more on campaign level insights. So you might want to understand buyer groups or who you're reaching, the audience you're reaching, also some test and learn scenarios before you roll something out nationally. So Pandora can do, can be measured in that space, but it all has different goals. And I think part of it is understanding the objectives and what you're looking for out of the solution.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff, and also thank you, Kerry, and thank you, T. We are approaching the end of our Q&A time here, so I do want to, again, let our audience know if we didn't get to your question, and there were a few that we didn't have a chance to get to here. I will make sure that they get forwarded over to our speakers, and also, of course, to our audience. You've got right here up on this Q&A slide contact info for all three of our speakers, so I'm sure if you have specific questions for each of them, undoubtedly you've been taking this information down, and their email boxes are probably already full, but I just want to at least point that out for everyone. So some final reminders here to our audience. Again, if you want the slides from today and the information on this study that was done by Nielsen and Pandora, you'll find that in the Event Resources tab up at the top of your screen. Also, you will be getting notification around 3:30, 4 o'clock today with a link over to the on-demand recording of today's webinar. So check your email for that. People were still asking about that just a moment ago. So again, recording, look for your email. Finally, please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars. See what we've got coming up, and if you enjoyed today, sign up for something coming up as well. So again, I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day to join us, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.